Thanks for coming and choosing the Prague room. I went to film school in Prague, and I can guarantee that it's awesome, and so will this panel be. So I'm going to start off letting all of the panelists introduce themselves. So if you could just start by telling us a little bit about your present business, any background, about a minute and a half of goodness, then we'll start things there.
Hello. I'll try to keep it shorter than a minute and a half. Mitchell Reichut. My company is called June Group, J-U-N. Name of the company means truth. And our job is to get millions of people to see branded content. We define branded content as a video, typically a longer video, or anything that happens on a web page. So we work for a lot of Fortune 500 brands, and we bring the audience that they want in a very open and transparent way. By way of background, I started my career as an advertising art director, similar to Izzy, who could have been my partner had we crossed paths a little bit earlier, because he's a writer, but I'm getting ahead. Then I fell into the internet early on in my career and wound up running this company. That's my story.
My name is Anselm Samuel Rock. I am the general manager for MatterNoir.com, which is part of the portfolio of blogs from Mogul Media Group, which is an online company. We have 9 properties in total, 5 focused on the African-American market, 2 focused on the continent of Africa. We have AFK Travel and AFK Insider, which is about the business of Africa. And we have 2 in the Latin market. Company started in 2006 on a $6 domain purchase. And now we're a multi-million-dollar company with, offices in Johannesburg, in Detroit, in LA, Atlanta, New York, and Florida as well. Background on myself, started off as a writer as well, writing for print, and I transitioned to digital, probably with my own blog actually, and online with my site is where I kind of trained myself on social media, on SEO, things of that nature. And then eventually I realized I needed to get an actual digital job on my resume that wasn't a blog that I owned. So since then, I've been at Business Brands. I've been in Chicago for a year and a half, and then now landed over here as general manager over at MatterNoir. And that is it.
Hi, I am Suzanne Bentley. I work for the Story Lab, which is part of the Dentsu Aegis network. It's a content agency within the network. We work with brands of all kinds to help them really find kind of that magic and the intersection between consumer and what is culturally relevant to them, as well as media partner that works for who we're trying to reach, and the advertiser as well. I started my career actually in advertising as well. So I have a background with traditional advertising and learning the craft there. I moved on to work on the publisher side with Time Warner and Hulu, both in linear and digital kind of lines of business. So working now in the content space, I bring a nice perspective of kind of everything. I have a goal of being client side, and then I'll have my true like trifecta, but that's me.
Hi, I'm Lisa Hickey. I'm CEO of Good Men Media, Inc., and we run an online content site called the Good Men Project. And the Good Men Project started about 4 years ago to talk about the changing roles of men in the 21st century. We've since grown from 0 to 4 million unique visitors a month over the past 4 years. And we're really the only online publication of our size really digging into how men's roles are changing and what that means and what that conversation looks like.
Hi, I'm Izzy DeVellis. I am the Global Chief Creative Officer and Chief Strategic Officer of Naked, which is sort of unusual. I started my career also in the creative side of the business. And as I got older, I got smarter and realized if I wanted to actually affect the outcome, I needed to get closer to changing the trajectory. And just sort of innately, all of my best friends became the planners and the strategists of the agency. And eventually from an unofficial position, I made it an official position. And then when I had the opportunity to go to Naked, one of the sort of founding principles that that came over was I wanted to actually turn the creative department and the strategy department into a single department, and that's what I'm in the process of doing.
Terrific, thank you all. And my name is Elizabeth Keener. I am Senior Design Manager and Chief of Staff at IBM Interactive Experience. We're down in Astor Place in the same building as Watson. And I also come from an advertising agency background originally. And being at IBM is a really interesting place right now because the company's just made a $100 million investment in design. So we're opening up labs and studios all around the world at the moment. I just got back 2 weeks ago from opening the studio in London. So it's a really excited and unexpected place to be in some ways. But it's interesting to see, and in part, a huge migration among all of us from the agency side into the digital world in one way, shape, or form. So it'll be interesting to explore that a little bit more today. So I wanted to start with a general question, and whoever wants to take it first can do that. I wanted to think about, and you can answer this in two ways, when we're looking at the business landscape right now, what are the opportunities that you're seeing, or what are the threats that you're seeing that you think may be interesting for us to talk about?
I'll give you a good threat. Just to kick things off with a little spice. I think that ad fraud is sort of the phantom menace right now. If you believe most of the reports, and we see our own data, 50 to 70% of online video, for instance, is never seen by a human being. It's bots, it's fraudulent traffic, it's undermining the monetization of major publishers. It harms ad platforms like mine, and clients are getting ripped off. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that the money that brands are spending to reach legitimate audiences is going into the pockets of some pretty bad people. So I think that's the biggest threat.
That is definitely a significant threat. Absolutely.
No, I concur. It's a very large fraud threat.
And as far as ad fraud, what are we able to do, or what have you been doing to combat it, basically?
Well, it's actually, our platform is somewhat of an antidote for it, because all of the interactions that we drive are opt-in. We don't have a lot of display advertising, and we actually help our clients avoid ad fraud. And I think that the reason that it exists to the degree that it does is because brands that spend in digital advertising are kind of disconnected from the media that they're buying. Your typical brand manager has so much on his mind, shelf space in Walmart, packaging, all kinds of things, that's the real job. And the media is only a small portion of it. And they're so overwhelmed that they can't really track the stuff. So that's why you see, by a lot of estimates, billions of dollars going into this. And I think that if brands get outraged enough, as I think they're beginning to, as the media picks up on this, then they'll do something about it. And it's really as simple as not standing for it anymore. And you'll see the dominoes fall, so that it becomes less of a problem.
That's a great example. Anyone else?
I'll just say, I think that the biggest threat is just too much content. Like, what are we going to do with all of this content? And somebody said earlier in a panel, there's going to be curators of the curation, to come up next. So that's my biggest, what do we do about this?
I actually think that that's part of the opportunity, though, as well. So, part of kind of what we do for brands is we think about all the content that's being developed and how we can better organize it and distribute it so it's maximizing their efficiencies, right? So I think not only is there a threat in the digital landscape, though, in terms of kind of that fraud, but there's also, even if you think about the social sphere, there are the Twitter bots, right? And so if we're actually creating that connected media ecosystem, it's how do we make sure that we're reaching the target audience that we want with the content that's engaging for them. And I think that goes back to, making sure that we are creating content that is engaging. And so there is an opportunity, I think, for brands to do a better job of connecting their ecosystem. I think that they are really great at putting content out there with the media partners that they choose. But more often than not, you'll find brands lack activating their own ecosystem, so activating their own channels, or if they do, they literally take their 30-second spot and throw it on YouTube. So rather than making that content relevant to the audience and how they would engage with the Twitter or a YouTube beyond just the traditional media.
Izzy or Anselm, do you have any good thoughts around opportunities or threats that you're experiencing?
I think Mitchell covered the threats, very, very well. In terms of opportunity, though, one thing I do see or think from a publishing standpoint is video. I know at our company as well, we've done video, but we've just done it not in an organized way. So definitely this year we have a very set focus of developing solid content and even operating under an ideal of sometimes less is more. you know, because before we would just throw things out. Let's get 10 videos up a day, so on and so forth, but there's no consistency. And we're kind of approaching it now more so almost as programming. You know, like a network has every Tuesday, the show comes on at a set time. We're kind of adopting that same approach. And also working with our team, like recently, we decided even with, if we have 10 great series that we want to do, rather than trying to squeeze one in for every day or two for every day, you know what, let's step back and treat it like seasons. Let season one run, and we kind of have it all in the can and have it in the bag. That way we can knock out 15 interviews in a row and have a full season for 15 weeks consistently and guarantee that we'll make that, rather than trying to find each week, we got to get somebody, you're doing a poor video quality, you're not really doing the best you can. And in that way we can kind of rotate and let the audience also want more. You'd like this 15 run, but after 52 weeks, you might be tired of it. It's kind of worn out. But if you spread it out and do it quarterly, this is in the summer, this is in the spring, so on and so forth, you kind of find more diversity in that way. So I do see video as a big opportunity, because also, I forget the stat I read it the other day about, you know, the audience is more likely to watch a video than they are to read a site. You know, get more time, more engagement in that way. So I think video really is a big opportunity that a lot of brands, advertisers can really capitalize on in the right way.
I guess I'll have to say something now. To sort of jump on what Anselm was just saying, without the H. It is the best of times and worst times. So the great thing is, yes, that from the creative side, you're right. You see words leaving the internet, you know, by droves. You know, it's sort of interesting. All you have to do is go back, look at CNN, USA Today, and even New York Times 3 years ago, 5 years, and 10 years ago. We are moving to a video-based internet very quickly. So the other thing from, you know, maybe the less strategic and more the creative side of me is like storytelling actually has never been more valuable. And definitely sort of think 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was sort of leaving. It wasn't about that. It was just about getting, you know, the right, well, you still hear about getting the right message to the right person at the right time. Now, the message part wasn't as important because we could get to the audience and you see metrics that say, well, if I get this message and even as simple as their logo 21 times in front of this person's face, you know, I can convert that person. But now because video is, I'm more than happy to engage and click, especially if you make it just about the right length. You know, sort of storytelling and narrative and making people feel has probably never been easier and more starting to become more valued again.
I agree with that. And I think, you know, I have produced many a video in my life, and I am curious from what you just said, you can make people feel, but then driving them towards some action that you want them to take is sometimes what I have found in my career to be the challenge, or sort of where the conversation stops. And it's like, you have me sufficiently aroused and now I don't know where to channel that energy. So do any of you have any experience, you know, in that sort of situation? And, you know, whether it's a very explicit call to action or an implicit one, sort of how you drive the conversation beyond like that initial peak of interest?
One thing I think that's different, a lot of mistakes that we make, you know, within the industry is always approaching it trying to sell. You know, if you want to liken it to a real relationship, you want to attach to your brand and what you create in terms of content, you should be more about making the friendship, making the connection, and then a subtle sell. It's not really about putting this in front, you know, in front of your face. You know, I'm the king of bad analogies. An analogy I'll use now is if you have a club promoter, come to my party, come to my party, come to my party. I don't know who you are. I don't know if your party's any good. But if we become friends and it's like, hey, we want to hang out. We should hang out sometime. Oh, I have a party. Come to the party. Now I'm more likely to leave the house in the snowstorm to come to your party because you're someone that I like. You're someone that I trust. And that's the same thing we should approach it in terms of how we try to sell product. But I think when we go forward to sell first, it's like it's very shallow. It's not authentic. And I think that's what people really want. I think the audience they're not dumb. They can kind of see through. And I've seen very poorly executed native advertisements with, oh, this is native, but like you can tell that it's not authentic. You wouldn't do this on a normal basis if it wasn't someone paying you for this. Or it's so blatant that the image is this, you know, it's always mentioned throughout the piece. Check this out, 2 o'clock, this is coming on. So it's more about making an authentic experience with the user and making it where they trust you. You think about it in terms of certain brands exist, you know, within a family. You know, if my mother used Bounty, I use Bounty, my children use Bounty, it's just what you grew up with. So it's the same kind of thing you want to do with your product. You want to make it something where this is something that's part of your life and it's more native, not to throw that catchword around, but it's native to your life and organic, as opposed to trying to sell. That's very, just when I say that, I feel like I'm pushing people away when I say sell. But if I say hello, how are you doing? That's a different kind of embracing, bringing you into the conversation rather than trying to throw something in your way. So that's my thought on that one.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I think obviously the emotional connection is huge, right? If you don't respond to the content, then you don't care and you can easily just turn it off. And that's kind of what our roles are, is creating that engaging content, because in today's day and age, you just click off of it or you just don't watch it. You know, it's too easily to just ignore. But I think if we are able to draw those connections and create that emotion, it's making sure that you give a consumer a path to follow, right? And I think that more often than not, if you say you see some content and you go and you search it, you may not find it, right? So it's that there's a dead end there. And I think if we get smarter about not creating or not having dead ends and really activating search and social, which really are kind of the best thing that's ever happened to brands, then we can create that kind of funnel and steer that person down their journey that we want them to have.
I think it's interesting where we've all come from traditional advertising, that it used to be, it was divided into, you know, brand advertising and brand awareness, and then direct response, where it was the act now. And there was always this conflict between, well, whether, you know, do you really want to sell something, or is it okay to just create the brand? And I think that now it's actually easier than ever to create a brand. So that is the opportunity here. But you're right, if you're constantly pushing and selling and trying to force people into action, that goes against this relationship that you're making. So I do think that is what we really need to do, is say, how can I make this experience, get people emotionally invested, and not worry about making the sale today, but realize it's a long-term process.
I was at an academic conference not long ago, and I saw a fascinating presentation about e-commerce. And the point of the presentation was this, another wonderful buzzword, attribution. So in other words, what kind of advertising actually moves product off the shelf, so to speak. And they went into this study thinking that, you know, the Google action-oriented units that drive right to purchase would be the most valuable and the most effective, but they actually found the opposite. So in the study of e-commerce, they were looking at how people interacted with those sites, and people came to a site knowing that they wanted Ralph Lauren, knowing that they wanted a Chrysler car, knowing the specific brand that they were interested in many times before they actually made the purchase. So the study actually suggested that the softest, brand-oriented, image-oriented fluff, quote unquote, that most people eschew in favor of really highly targeted, audience-driven advertising, that long sort of tail branded stuff was the most effective at driving sales. And it was a fascinating study. It blew everyone away in the room.
I think you need to share that with us. I would love to see that. I, prior to joining IBM, I ran my own design agency for 8 years, and I felt like the biggest obstacle and challenge that I faced was the fact that people immediately wanted to know the ROI on any campaign, and sometimes it is something that you may not see right away, and you may not be able to prove immediately. So it's good. I will certainly follow up with you to see that study, because that sounds absolutely fascinating. And I think it's a good segue into the other side of our conversation about monetization. So it would be great. All of your businesses are slightly different, obviously, but it would be nice to understand, without naming specific dollar amounts and facts and figures, just essentially what your business model is like and how your companies make revenue. You can start, Michelle.
So our company charges on a cost per engagement. In other words, we only charge when we deliver the activity that our clients wanted. It could be a completed video view. It could be initiation of video view. It could be when someone visits a page for a certain number of seconds, 60 seconds, say, and we'll only charge when that action happens. It's akin to a Google AdWords, where impressions don't matter to us. We're not big believers. Not that there's anything against display advertising, but we don't charge on impressions. We only charge on engagement.
Terrific.
Yeah, traditional, media company, we do it through advertising as the main revenue stream. Also for the company, we've also last year started a film division. So we were doing, we were scheduled to do 16 documentaries. We call them docutainment. It was entertaining documentaries. We did 12 last year, did them all digital releases. There were no physical releases at all until the tail end. This year we're doing physical releases, but it was through Amazon. It was through a new deal we had with Cinedigm. So that was a new revenue opportunity on that end. Other than that is native ads, branded content, things of that nature, traditional how we make our revenue.
We're on the agency side, so we are, sitting within the media landscape, and what we do as kind of the content agency is ensure that we partner with our media investment teams to build out a strategy that makes sense for our brands that we're working with. So we really feel like if we think about content in the beginning and how we want to tell that story throughout the year for a brand, we have a better opportunity to maximize their investments. So if you think about kind of the old school way of, you go and you have your upfront buy, and then the content agency hears maybe 3 months down the road, oh yeah, we have these TBDs within this show for a content opportunity, go figure something out. That is against the way that we want to work. We are very, focused on being much more strategic so that we can really create content that matters against the audience that matters for the brand.
So I run a content site, and we monetize in however we can get money pretty much, but most of it is from banner ads, and then larger sponsorships with brands who, whether you call it native advertising or something else, it's brands that want to be a part of the conversation that we're already having. So if we're talking about the changing roles of men in the 21st century, what brands are talking about the evolution of men, and how can that story really be a part of our story? And then we also have a paid subscription product. So we do try to monetize in several different ways.
All right, I'm going to answer this in two parts. First part is currently our business model is pretty well the worst one you could have. I work for an advertising agency, and we have generally, a rate card. It's blended hours, and you say it takes whatever. It doesn't make a difference. You say it takes 100 hours to create this thing, and the client will say, do it for 80 hours, or and you're not lying. It's going to take you 100. It's going to take you 100 hours. So actually, but here's the thing that I've been trying to sell, and actually I have all the players that are ready to do this. I just now need a client. So the business model that I would like to do is actually based 100% on performance. I have a private equity firm that will actually put up all the money for media and production. I have an agency that will put up all its resources in actually creating the content to do it. The only thing the brand has to do is put up the brand and make sure it has distribution. Obviously, the private equity firm will check you out and make sure that you are legit. But it's great for brands that are dormant. All you have to do is walk into a liquor store or a grocery store. There's plenty of brands that do not get supported. If they pass mustard, we will invest. And usually, you're smart enough. It's going to be you do it across multiple brands and probably over multiple years. But I've pitched this to private equity, and they were like, "This is great. We'll do this." Pitch it to my CEO. Say, "Great, we will do this. We will bet on ourselves." When I've done this, sort of personally and privately with I've done this twice in my life with friends that either own, whatever restaurants. Usually, they pay me to go away. So that is a model that I would like to move to, rather than. And everyone says, "Oh, great, I like to get paid for performance." Well, actually, when you actually put it in front of them, you still end up with sort of, can we just pay you for the hours? And not the hours that not the 100 hours that you actually wasted, but just the 10 hours it took you to write the one thing I want to buy. So I don't know if that was an answer.
No, it's a great answer, and I love that model, and
So
I can't wait to hear about your first client that takes you up on that.
We'll see, but I have everything else in place, so I'm just it's in essence renting a brand.
Absolutely. So Mitchell, I want to go back to you and talk a little bit about how brands find audiences for their content. I think you mentioned that you see brands moving away from social and moving towards creating their own hubs. So it would be wonderful for you to speak about that. And then from whatever perspective the rest of the panel has that they want to speak about that topic, then that would be lovely as well.
Sure. We just ran a study looking at how brands are dealing with social media as it changes. And yes, they're spending less on social media and more on their own properties, which isn't to say that they're less interested in social media. In fact, they're so interested in social media, it's become so ubiquitous that instead of like us on Facebook, they're saying, come to our site. And brands, for the fourth time in my career, are becoming publishers once again. And there's good reason for that, because they want to own that interaction, that two-way interaction with their consumers. So we're seeing requests, I think over last year, 25% increase in requests for drive to my site after whatever action they're asking us to do, and a 33% decrease in like us on Facebook, Twitter, or any other kind of social action. And again, that is because all those social actions are now embedded in their sites. So the media landscape has changed an awful lot in that way. Facebook famously changed their algorithm. So they said for years to brands, build a community on our site, reach your consumers on our site, we'll be the go-between. And then when they all did it, they said, great, now we're going to charge you to access them. And that was, some people said that that was sort of a bait and switch. However, brands were already leaving that interaction anyway. And so I think Facebook did it maybe for their own selfish purposes, but also because they saw the trend. Instead of being everybody's de facto social network, they've become just another sort of media property to buy on a CPM, and it's been quite successful for them. So those are the main trends that we're seeing.
That's great. Does anyone else want to speak to brands finding audiences for their content?
It's interesting. Some of what we're doing now is almost the opposite to a degree of what you just talked about. Like, actually, we're having a big focus on virality, like really trying to create viral content, which everyone tries to do, but you really can't shake a bottle and it's viral, you know, but really taking more data analysis and seeing if something organically takes off in a matter of hours, a matter of days, like, hey, you know what, we need to kind of amplify this post, and maybe now we'll put the spend on a Facebook ad to kind of push this forward and just really see, because the audience is already tapped into it. So now we're kind of like letting the audience dictate what we spend money on, rather than thinking, hey, any post we do, we interviewed this person, so on and so forth, this is going to be a home run. We kind of sit back and wait to kind of see if it kind of does push off in that way, and then invest the money and actually trying to push it forward. So it's more of a smarter investment into virality. And also, I think in terms of social media in that regard, the industry has always looked at direct traffic, and we still look at direct traffic as well. But as technology grows, you know, your phones are getting bigger. We all have the iPhone 6 or the Galaxy, whichever phone it is, because again, if you look at video on your phone on the go, and a lot of readers, myself included, I'm not going to sites directly. I use Feedly, and I'm looking at all the sites I need to look at all in one spot. And I'm coming in through a side door as opposed to the front door. So I think the trend will also go where the referral traffic, the social media traffic will kind of start to trump what the direct traffic is. The direct traffic is still important because it shows your brand equity, but the way the audience is changing and evolving, how they get content. You know, we go to our Facebook feed all day and you see different things. It could be a story from 2 years ago because of crazy algorithm, but you're getting your information in different ways. So that's going to be a shift, I think, in the importance actually of social, because it's going to drive traffic in a new way, whether it be old content, new content. It's really that discussion, and it's the cool factor. Again, it's the friendship. Your friends are talking about this, they're sharing this. 10,000 people shared that. Oh, it must be something I need to share, as opposed to like, oh, it only has two likes, 2 comments. I'm not really going to read that. So I think there's a shift and an importance for virality in that way.
I want to jump off of what you said about virality. So we study virality all the time on our site. And we really want, because you can have, we publish 32 posts per day. And out of any of those posts, it could get anywhere from 300 page views to our all-time high of 13 million page views. And so the difference between that and how we figure out how well a post is going to do is really, really, really fascinating. And so you said that you waited over time, over a day or so, to see. We can actually tell within the first 3 minutes of a post going on Facebook, whether it's going to take off and go viral or not. And we look at the rate of interactions on Facebook. So if it's getting 3 interactions per minute in the first 3 minutes, it's going to go viral. And if it's getting less than that, it's going to be one of the lesser page view things. And so we use a combination of it's all of our social sites. It's all of the networks of all of the people that write for us. We've created this very diverse but connected web. There we go. we modeled ourselves after the internet. But we actually have really studied the way that things go viral, and Jonah Peretti from BuzzFeed had this analogy that when things go viral, it's like a wildfire. You have a wildfire effect. So what he meant by that is that he said there are certain conditions before a wildfire takes off. So the ground is dry, the trees are dry, the trees are really close together. And if all those conditions take place, then you strike a match and all of a sudden, boom, a wildfire occurs. But if the trees are really far apart and that they're all wet and the grass is green, then you won't get that wildfire that happens even if you take a blowtorch to the forest. And so we study that because there's 2 things. So what are the conditions right? And for us, the conditions are right when our traffic has been growing for the past 3 days or 3 or 4 days. So if we see traffic steadily growing with new uniques coming in, we know for a fact that a post will go viral. We don't know what post is. We know that some post will go viral at the end of that 3-day growth. And then we also look at the trees close together. And what that means is how our social networks are actually interconnected. So whether our Facebook fans are connected with each other, whether our Twitter followers are connected with each other. We want people not too connected to each other because that's a very small forest, but we want overlapping networks of people and so we're continually trying to get our trees closer together. We talk about this at our staff meetings all the time. How do we get the trees closer together? But it's how do you get those networks of people that are connected to your brand, and how do you have those become their own ecosystem? And then we have had now 23 posts that we say have gone viral, so that's over 1 million page views each. So we're getting really good at predicting how to get those 1 million+ page view posts.
That's great.
No, I was just going to add, so for us, we really kind of base the content that we develop in the distribution strategy on consumer insights. So looking at kind of what our target is, their passion points, their behaviors, what they enjoy in terms of, a media platform and content, how they behave with their friends, with their family. And then we build out kind of, where we think there are white spaces for brands to own. And then we build the strategy from that and the content that we think resonate with that audience. So, that varies. It could be traditional, it could be digital, it could be social, it could be brand publisher. And I do think that a lot of brands are leaning back to being brands as publishers. And I think, I hate to bring up Red Bull at conferences because I know everybody always talks about that brand, but they really kind of did it right in all kind of aspects. If you go and you search Red Bull, they turned themselves from being the college drink, vodka mixer to really associating with extreme sports, and they got really focused about who they thought their audience was, and how they were going to map that out across their organization and how they were going to publish themselves as a brand. So I think that, if you lean in on consumer insights, you can build out a smart strategy.
So I'm glad you brought up the notion of virals, because back when I was making a lot more video content, my biggest pet peeve was when a client would call and say, make me a viral video. So is there anyone that has any tips in how to address that situation or that question if it's ever asked of you?
Oh, I've been in many a meeting where people have actually said, how do we make this go viral? And I'm like, look, if you'd stop pounding on the table, we could actually have a conversation about it. But, it just seemed to be this big mystery out there. And I don't actually think it's as mysterious as people think. Like I honestly think that you can have a plan and a strategy, and you can get the amount of views that you want on something if you figure out how to make content that really resonates with people, how to make content that they want to share, how to make content that people can actually participate in. And then if you have a really strong ecosystem where you can get that content out to, from tree to tree to tree to tree to forest to forest to forest to forest, you can actually make things go viral.
But really, I mean, they're not saying when I want viral, it means I don't want to pay a whole lot of money. I want something famous.
Right. That's the
'Cause
point.
You're right, because it is a bit of a red herring. It is about the best people in the industry do it. They build an audience. And that audience comes back and back, and some of that is the stuff that you look at daily, and it's really useful. And every once in a while, it is that hero, to use a YouTube experiment, a hero piece of content that is viral, but it's because they built an audience that keeps going back, and then they'll, to your point, will share the network because the trees are together. But really, that's not what they're saying. They're just saying, great, I don't have to pay for media. How do I have this great great case studies like my Camp Gyno. How can I take a $6,000 video and get 100 million hits? That's what they really want. It's
right. Well, like it used to be that you would, if you were an advertiser and you wanted to be seen by everyone, you would plunk down $6 million and get an ad on the Super Bowl. And that's how you did it. And CEOs of companies put an ad on the Super Bowl just so that everyone would know the name of their company when they went to the next cocktail party. And so now you're right. They want that experience of getting that, being well known in a really short amount of time without putting that $6 million down.
Yeah, and I would actually pose a question back to a brand too, like how risk adverse are they? How nimble are they as an organization to be able to react? And I definitely think that an always on strategy helps, right, to build that following.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can tap into those, that smaller group that are your huge fans that will continue to talk about whatever that post was that you were willing to put out. And in reaction to, what's happening in the culture at that moment, because that's really, I think what kind of tips the scale a little bit. But I don't know if anybody has any opinions on the blue dress or white dress.
It's white and gold. I'm sorry. It's white and gold. There's no two ways about it. It's interesting because our business is different than the other four, probably the other five of you, because we no longer make content.
Right.
And so it started off, we got these amazing videos. We were responsible for the Kobe jumps over the car way back when, and we did some unbelievable viral videos. And we were like, we're a viral video shop. And then people started giving us stuff that wasn't that good. And unlike these guys, we don't have any control over it. And they'd be like, here's this flaming thing, just make it go viral for me. And when it didn't go viral, it was my fault.
Right. Yeah.
So our business drifted pretty quickly away from that to much more of a paid strategy. And we deliver a specific audience for price, and that's it. And if you want men 18 to 24, that's what we'll deliver. You need 1 million of them. This is how much it costs. When do you need them? And we'll deliver it in an open and transparent way and tell you where it really came from. So it's a little different for us. And every once in a while, we will still get an amazing video, and somebody will buy 1 million views, and they will receive 40 million. And there's nothing better than that. It's wonderful. I personally, as a creative, when early on in this business, I used to think, I know, I can tell because I'm a creative, I know. And then every once in a while, I'd say this thing is awful, and it would blow up. And then I'd say this thing is amazing, and no one would like it. And then I was like, I really don't know that. Well, I'm not that cool anymore. I live in Connecticut, and that maybe it just never was that cool. But I think a lot of our brands, and we work with some brands that are edgy, the Nikes and Apples of the world, and some that are much more conservative. And the conservative ones dipped their toe in the viral waters and said, you know what, I'm boring, and I like making money and being boring. And those are the ones that tend to gravitate toward our platform, I think.
Yeah, I think a big question when it comes to viral, someone walking in saying, I want a viral video, by asking that question, they already start off on the wrong foot, because most of the true viral content is totally by accident. You can't say, hey, I want to come and give you $1 million to have the cat knock something off the table. That's going to go viral, but not because you paid me for it. It's because this random cat videos are the #1 thing on YouTube, and they go viral like every day. Someone can just sit in your own house and make a viral video, but it's very authentic. It's just natural. It just happened. The dress. I don't know how that happened. I woke up in the middle of the morning. I was like, wait, what's going on? This dress, it's yellow and gold. What are they talking about? You know? But this went viral. It was a conversation, a water cooler conversation for 2 days. But I don't really think that the designer of the dress could have sat there and strategized like, hey, let's put the dress online. Say it's another color. You know, if you came and pitched that idea,
How does it help your brand anyway?
it wouldn't help. But, you know, it could help now that there's so much conversation about this, where I was forced to look at the dress in many different angles and see the different breakdown, the scientific light, you know, breakdowns, wasting time doing this to see what color this dress is that still looks yellow and gold, you know. But it's a matter of like figuring it out. But I think the designer might get some props, you know. But I think I saw a brilliant headline the other day where it's like, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, blue or whatever. It's an ugly dress, so it doesn't matter. So that doesn't help, you know, the designer or whoever made the dress in that regard. But
that doesn't help, but a brand could have jumped on that easily, right?
They could.
And you know.
But now
so-
they're jumping on it,
Could
coming in second. So I don't think the second version or iteration of a viral video is never as good as the first. It's like when you make a photocopy, it starts getting a little bit more blurred and blurry, and people get tired of it. It's, oh, this again, this is what you do.
But that Oreo campaign during the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, like that was, they saw this pop culture thing happening. They had the war room. They built that thing. Remember that? During
Which
the
one-
Super
which
Bowl,
one
there
was
was a blackout during the
Yeah.
Super Bowl,
Blackout.
and Oreo had the ad. that
You can
came
still
out.
dunk in the dark.
You can still
Yeah,
dunk in the
okay, I
dark.
remember
And
now.
it just was and then the next year, the Super Bowl was like every brand had a war room. Okay, right? It was adaptive marketing. It's very hard to capture lightning in a bottle.
You can't. It's about timing. But I think there's a point that was said earlier that a big part of it, like also when you look at virality, it's like how you're defining that. What's the number? You know, because let's say, you know, BuzzFeed, I love what they do. They do great content, and they can have a video that has 1 million views. For a small brand, that 1 million views could be viral for them. But I think for BuzzFeed at this point, 1 million views is nothing to them, you know. But you have to look at how they got their worst video getting to 1 million views, their subscriber base. If you have 50 million subscribers, getting 1 million in the grand scheme isn't really that much, you know. So when you have more guaranteed people that are going to see this, it's likely to hit that number. So if you come in saying that you want a viral video, what's the real number, or how you quantify that being viral? Because if I have 10,000 viewers on a regular basis and then it goes to 50 million, maybe it went viral. But to someone that has 10 million, that's, you know, it's nothing. So I think that's a really big question to kind of ask, to look at it when you're talking about viral.
Yeah, and I want to get back to the dress for 1 minute because, and then I never want to talk about it again for as long as I live. But the people who made money on the dress were the publishers. And so what happens when something goes viral is that it goes from individuals to small groups to large groups. That's the definition of a tipping point. Something gets to a tipping point when it makes that jump from small groups to large groups. And so so what happens is, you know, something like that, like an individual says, oh, this is interesting, the dress looks like different colors, and they start telling people, and so you have a lot of individuals, and then it might go to small groups. And then the publishers are out there looking for those stories that are about to tip, because when they write about them, hundreds of thousands of people come to their website and they make money. So BuzzFeed made somewhere around $70,000 in the first 5 hours after they posted that dressed photo on their site. And so all of the other publishers said, oh, we want a piece of that pie that's about to be a multi-million-dollar pie of people coming to look at this story. And so they wrote about it too. So you have to understand that people didn't care about the dress because they really cared about the dress. They cared about the dress because big media told them to care about the dress, because big media wanted to make the money from the page views. So that's what's an interesting phenomena to understand, that if you can get your story from the small groups to the large, from the individuals to the small groups, that big media will then want to write about it, because you've already built this audience that they can then monetize.
Couldn't
That's a
agree.
great point.
Yeah. It's follow the money. What's the question?
Follow the money.
Yes, exactly.
Follow the money. And I think it's understanding that has always been important. Like if you understand how media works, then you can actually take advantage of it. But you're right. Everyone's figuring out the hack. And you'll see that more and more, because it's like that's how they're going to make their money.
Right.
They're making their money faster that way than they are trying to go and do another sales call. So
Exactly.
and so understanding that will, you know, to quote people like, I don't know if you know, guys like Howard Gossett, who is a famous advertising person from the 60s. The reason he was so great is he understood it wasn't about the ad, but it was in some ways the same thing, how media would take it and pick it up and amplify it. And that's what, if people can take advantage of that, that's how brands will take advantage of it, and how to actually, because they understand that algorithm, how they make money, then great, I'm gonna, you know, basically figure out my hijack or be the amoeba onto that. But it's, which is slightly, you know, it is what it is. So rather than fighting it, figuring out how to actually take advantage of it.
Exactly.
So I'm going to switch gears for a minute and talk about mobile. At IBM, we have a mobile first strategy, and we're doing a big project right now with wearables. So as everyone here knows, the mobile phone is the primary device of choice for millennials. And even beyond that, you know, for those of us that are no longer millennials, it's still something that we have in our hands and have at our bedside pretty much all the time. So I just wanted to ask any of you who want to talk about how the mobile experience is changing the way you approach your work, and do you believe that it's the new first screen, and how are you adapting to multiple devices?
It's definitely the first screen. There's no two ways about it. I think that it's turned the web pretty quickly into AM radio. In other words, still viable second or third choice. I think that the same study I referenced earlier said something along the lines of a 271% increase from brands in requests for multi-screen campaigns. Google has gone a long way into training the Fortune 500 into screen agnostic perspectives. And what we see when we run video campaigns, and a good percentage of our work is video, is dramatically higher engagement rates, dramatically higher completion rates, and dramatically higher click after the view rates on mobile devices, which may seem counterintuitive. It's a smaller screen. However, when you think that the video plays full screen, it's got your whole attention, whatever action buttons by percentage are a much larger portion of the screen, then you start to see why. Also, if you're not sitting at your desk texting while you're doing something else, you're just much more focused on a mobile device. So our brands have started asking us to run more of it on mobile because they see the performance there dramatically higher.
Anyone else on mobile?
Yeah, mobile's it's interesting. Like, honestly, you know, sometimes I'm very analog, where I'm still a desktop user. You know, when I really want to read something, it's like almost like holding a paper. I want to be on a desktop, have a full screen. But I do understand that the audience, when I look at the numbers every week, I'm saying, hey, you know, our desktop numbers are growing, but year over year, the mobile has like 100%, 150%. So I definitely see the users are coming in as a first screen opportunity. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the bigger phones, it's kind of going in that lane where you're making a better platform. You know, even with the iPad mini, same kind of thing. You kind of have, it's not too big, it's not too small, it's like just right, and you do enjoy it. But the problem that, you know, we as a publisher have to kind of address, that the ad units you can fit on a desktop are way more. You can get more out of that. When it comes to a mobile, you know, platform, it's like, oh, there's one or two, but you have more users. So it's really trying to figure out how the numbers work in your favor, whereas, okay, we can put more into mobile because the users are there, but how do we get the same amount of revenue we can get from the desktop? So that's still the hurdle we're trying to figure out. But I think a big answer to that is really studying and looking at user experience. That's the key thing. You know, you want to have the retention rate of your reader being engaged and going down the rabbit hole. You know, the old trick or the current trick, you know, is slideshows. Go through, click through, but the audience is not dumb. Again, you go through, it's like, oh, I can go to a page and say, oh, 15 things that Kim Kardashian, you know, did. I know what she did. You know, I can find it in one page. And there are different ways to get around that. You have pages where as you scroll down, the URL changes and you get that page view. It's a, you know, it's a trick, you know, that kind of happens that way. There's different ways to get around it. There are pros and cons either way. But I think a lot of traditional publishers are trying to figure out the best way to do that. But mobile, unfortunately, to me as an analog kind of guy, in that sense, it's still where the audience is going and figuring out how to adapt to that. And we have adapted to it, but making the money the same way off of it. That's the conundrum.
It's what a lot of our publishers feel. It's much harder to monetize, and it's a conundrum for them because that's where all the traffic is.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting point, because advertising has always mimicked the media it was in. So you had a newspaper, right? And you had a newspaper that had headlines and copy, and it was a big rectangular thing. And then you had ads in that newspaper that were rectangular and had headlines and copy. And then you had a TV show that had actors and actresses and a musical button at the beginning and a lot of people talking. And so then you had TV commercials that had, were just a shortened version of that, actresses and actresses, and a logo at the end. And so and radio, you had radio shows that were theater of the mind, and the best radio is the same thing. It tries to be theater of the mind and storytelling. So then, okay, so what is it on mobile? What is, to get back to your point about the experience, what is it about the mobile experience that you could mimic from an advertiser standpoint? And I don't think we've come up with that yet. And I think that's going to be the way that we monetize it. What is it that's so great about the phone that you can then mimic that experience and use that to monetize mobile better?
That's $1 million idea. If anyone in this room has one, has a solution to that question. That's terrific. So besides Red Bull, I wanted to hear your points of view about who's doing it well. And you could certainly cite examples from your own company or just like the industry at large, just something you've been impressed by over the past year or two.
I mentioned them earlier. I really think BuzzFeed does an amazing job. Just what I find myself, falling down a rabbit hole. Click on one video, you're clicking on the male version of it, then the Asian version of it. You're just going down the rabbit hole, watching one after the other. And I think, whether it be BuzzFeed, Upworthy, ourselves, whoever it is, it's when you as a publisher look at what someone else is doing and you think like, damn, like, why didn't we do that? But not in a way of like, it's the obvious thing, but like, that is just so smart, so sharp. And it's like, it just makes perfect sense. That's when someone's doing the right thing. But you want to be careful of not being a copier. Everyone wants to be original. You want to have authentic, content. But I tip my hat all the time to BuzzFeed. I just look at it and I was like, they did it again. I actually sent an email out. Actually today, I sent it out. BuzzFeed does it again. There was, I thought the video was, I guess it's a bad thing, but the content went out and I was like, this is amazing. This is like in our lane. This is what we should be doing. Or I pitched this idea, maybe I didn't, but we pitched the idea a couple of weeks ago. Why didn't that happen? Or it's a similar idea, but it was done better. And that's the challenge in that regard. But I definitely look at BuzzFeed as someone. Upworthy, what I appreciate about them is their headlines. They definitely do a very emotive kind of approach where they don't give you the information, but it makes you curious enough. What really turned me on to Upworthy was actually, I forgot how I got the link, but it was like the best 2.5 minutes of your life today. Something like that. I was like, oh, like, okay, what's that? I'm interested. I clicked on it and the story was actually a male gay couple talking about their love story of how when they were in the military, had to send letters to each other saying, oh, my girlfriend, so on and so forth. It was just this tender love story of two men. If it said that, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to click. I'm at work. I'm not going to do that. But the best 2 minutes of my life, I could enjoy 2 minutes right now, the best of my life. So once I saw that, I was like, wait, how did I get here watching this video? Bless you. So it was very interesting. And then I started looking more into what they're doing. And I saw a trend with their headlines where it was just really, they catch your attention. It's not a bait and switch. It's usually genuine to what's going on. But the way they position it is a way that it really piques your interest. It's like, I kind of have to click. There's some I click on where it's like, okay, I click right off. But it was just like, I kind of have to click. It just doesn't hurt to do that. So those are two brands I can think of that really do it well.
That's great.
So, you guys are talking about media brands. I'll talk from consumer brands. And there's a couple that do, individual executions like Ren did First Kiss, which I thought was amazing last year, where we just took people. But as a brand, it's just consistently, I think, maybe isn't as flashy, but does a great job, is Patagonia. The level of content they do on a weekly basis, how they connect to the consumer, understanding who they are. I think they did the best Black Friday event ever, which was you brought in your old equipment and they fix it for you. So on brand. So it's them understanding them and then using the platforms in a way that's genuine and authentic. So when you click on them, you are, you are getting a genuine exchange. So I'll pick that as the one brand I think is currently doing a great job across all platforms.
I'll give you something a little different. I'm obsessed with this email list. I don't know if any of you read Jason Hirschhorn's Media Redefined. It is the best email. This guy curates the best stories from around the web every day, and he has about 30 of them. And it pisses me off because I don't have time to read all of them. He's brilliant. If you have to sign up for this email list, Jason Hirschhorn's Media Redef, it will blow your mind. I have never seen anything like it. Absolutely addicted to it.
How much is he paying you for this fabulous endorsement?
That's right. Pick it up now.
I'm kidding.
I would just add in, I think GoPro has actually done a tremendous
yeah,
job
that's
with
good.
building their brand and aligning, again, with action sports and just really adventurous people. And they have very little branding in anything that they do. It's just, it's their camera, right? Capturing all these amazing things. And I would also add GE to the list. I actually think for a brand that's rather dry, they've done a fantastic job of building themselves as somebody who's interesting. And they do that well across various platforms. They don't really republish the same thing. They actually use Twitter in a very innovative way. And, they poke fun at themselves in a smart way. So I think that those are two brands that are doing a good job.
GoPro is actually a great example of something we talked about way at the beginning, where every time I see one of those, I'm like, oh, someday I'm going to buy a GoPro camera. I know it, and I know for a fact I'm going to buy it, but it's just not going to be today.
Yeah.
But I will buy a GoPro camera eventually.
So I have another question that I'm going to direct more towards Izzy, Lisa, and Suzanne, only because I feel like I have this answer already with Feedly and Jason's email list. I'm just curious as a little takeaway for everybody, if there's a favorite website, platform, or app that you're particularly taken by at the moment. I know that probably changes on a monthly, weekly, or daily basis. But if there's something out there that either from a curation standpoint is what you use to, look at your media in the morning, or something that could just be much more for fun or pleasure.
I like the Skim. I think that's a pretty obvious answer, but they do a really good job of curating content and giving it a voice and just making it really bite-sized pieces of information.
I go to Twitter. I'm kind of traditional in that space. Who thinks Twitter's traditional? But yeah, I just feel like, I got to pick who I wanted to follow, and therefore it's personalized to me. And, and then if I want to kind of swim out of that lane, I can by, discovering what's out there. But that's probably a go-to for me, just to see kind of what's trending and what's relevant for today.
So all the above, and then I'll add two that are just personal favorites of mine. And if they were in this room, I would not admit it. And Seth Godin's email, who
I always read Seth's. Yeah.
And it's just it's really easy and digestible. And then if he was here, I would never admit it in front of him. But it's he doesn't need it, but it's it sometimes just it just reminds you and sort of grounds you. And then a fellow colleague that I used to work with, Ferris Jakob, just started Genius Steals, and I'm a fan of that as well. So those are my two little to-your-indulge nuggets. But I'm same thing with Twitter. It's the edit of the people that I follow is my version of that.
Yeah, it's so funny. Twitter's so old to me now. I didn't even think of it. I was like, oh yeah, Twitter. I love Twitter.
It's a handle.
Yes, it's almost too obvious.
Yeah.
I almost brought up Seth Godin, Lisa, when you were talking about your formation of groups and tribes, and it's very much that.
Yeah, I learned a lot from Seth.
that train of thought. So before we take questions, I just wanted to ask one more question to the panel. If there's anyone in this room that's either looking to enter the industry or transition within the industry, what advice you would give to somebody right now?
Plastics. follow your passion. You know, the great thing about this industry is you can make it up. There are no rules. We're talking in sort of our 3 or 4 of us are pre-session here about there is no standard right now. The gatekeepers are all leaving their posts, as Neil Gaiman once said. And I think it's an amazing opportunity. So if you're passionate about something, you can seize it. And there's never been a time, I think, where creative people, however you want to define that, have more ability to just go out and capture an audience or start a business, or do anything that you want. It could be a physical business, but the internet enables you via Kickstarter or a million other tools to realize that without anybody else's help. You don't need a licensing deal. You don't need an agent. You don't need a company. You don't need a factory. It's remarkable.
Yeah, I think my advice would be simple, like, build a brand and don't be an a-hole, because no, but it's true, because people work with people that they actually like, like I tend to see certain examples, I won't call any names out, but certain people that are notoriously not nice to work with. And they are people that you work with them because you have to, because you're associated with XYZ, you work at this company. But when that person leaves that company, now you're just the a-hole, so now I don't have to work with you. I don't want to work with you. But when you're someone that has your own brand outside of the company you work for. At my first job, I never wanted to be Anselm from so-and-so. I wanted to be Anselm, be that. And that anywhere I've gone, no matter if I haven't talked to someone in years, it's been an intern, I might cross paths with that person someday. And it's like, oh, I remember when I was an intern, you said XYZ to me. And like, hey, now they're in a position where they could help me, so on and so forth. So being a genuine person, that's your brand. Because as a writer, as a journalist, as an editor, or a former, whatever you want to say, it's your name is all you have. When my name was on an article, that's the brand. That's my Coke. That, not Coke, other kind of Coke, but Coke Classic. that's your brand in that way. Sorry, I went somewhere else. But in that way, it's like, as a journalist, I'm looking at other journalists, there may be an article about a subject I'm not really into, but oh, wait, Aaliyah wrote this? I know Aaliyah, she does great work. So this must be a good story. And now you're gonna read that because of her brand. The name is all you have at the end of the day, in terms of coming into it from a journalistic standpoint. So your brand has to be solid, your product has to be solid, which is your words, but then also not being an a-hole. You gotta be fun to work with. There have been writers I worked with that are great, but I remember this one writer didn't want to be edited. I actually sent him edits on a piece, and he called, I'm about to leave, it was like 7 o'clock, leaving the office. He called, hey, can we go through the edits on this story, line by line? I'm like, what? What's going on? And we actually, out of respect for who he was a senior writer in the industry. We actually debated on, okay, I'll let you keep the original line in paragraph 2 if you let me change this one here. And I really was, I'm never working with this guy again. He's great, but I'm never going to work with you again because he was an a-hole. So those are the kind of things. Be good, have a brand, and don't be an a-hole. That's it. I'm done.
That's great.
I would just say do your research and talk to a lot of people. I think there's so many avenues for us to kind of march down, to your point. And it is a relationship business without a doubt. But, there's just different ways to get involved. And you may find that you want to be in a larger organization that can help you kind of define the path that you want to take, or you would prefer to do that on your own. And I think that they're all great opportunities. But if you don't talk to people and ask the right questions, then you may end up in a place that's not your culture fit, so to speak. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Mine is don't be afraid of the numbers. I had grown up as a creative my whole life, and it was like, no, I don't want to hear about the numbers. No, get them away from me. And I found that they're actually really beautiful now. It's really, really so cool. Like I like dive into spreadsheets like it's this work of art, but they really help inform your actions. They just help you make smarter decisions. They help you understand how the world works, and they can be really, really beautiful if you use them right. So.
So the advice was either to getting in or transition.
Yeah.
I'll pick transition. And my advice is don't try to, the expression is just jump to the front of the line. Don't waste your time trying to actually learn what you think is next. Just actually go to the front of the line, because you'll just always be behind anyway. So, I call myself I'm a digital immigrant. And actually, my parents are immigrants. I actually think actually being an immigrant is actually more powerful than being a digital native. I made a choice. My parents made a choice. I came to this territory, to this country, to this thing called digital by choice. And so therefore, I think you
That's great.
you know, so
I love
when you
that.
make a choice, it is clear, and therefore you learn, and you have, you know, your thing, you do research and you understand it. And if anyone here tries to learn a new language today, you know, at this age, it is, you understand the effort and energy you get to it, rather than if you're 3 years old, you're just dropped in, you can speak Chinese or Italian or Latin or whatever, because you're born that way. So don't bother trying to learn. Just go to the front of the line, or sorry, don't bother like trying to catch up. Just go to the front of the line of whatever you want to transition into and say, all right, this is what I'm going to do now. And you will, within usually about 6 or 12 months, if you do your job correctly, then you probably, you know, you'll get your 10,000 hours fast enough.
I love that. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yeah.
I feel like ROI, probably a bad word. Love what you said about your new business model. Just doing the work first, see how it goes, or the study that you mentioned about how, you know, something that may not be targeted to have a specific outcome might actually perform better. What are some new ways that you're explaining to clients what comes after ROI?
Well, I think ROI is a great word. And in fact, that was one of the premises upon which I started my company. Like I said up front, the word truth is really important to us. And we wanted, advertising is, I guess, inherently foggy and murky, and half my budget is a waste. I just don't know which half. And I never liked any of that. I wanted our clients to really feel like they had gotten something tangible back every time they spent with us. And so we let our clients define that. Oftentimes it will be reaching a specific audience, or having a specific action happen on their site, or having this many people view something. As the reason I mentioned that attribution study, and it was so important, is because it's incredibly hard to pin down what caused a purchase to happen. And I wish that I could say that my campaign for Poland Spring here drove their sales up 0.5%, but it could have been warm that month, or it could have been cold that month, or there could have been something happening in the Middle East that kept people from spending, and there's 1,000 dynamics. So we sort of lower the posts and say that, you know, look, you asked us to reach males 18 to 34 who are interested in automobiles, and 70% of the people that came to your page fit those criteria, and therefore we think it was a good, valuable way for you to spend money. So that's maybe not as ambitious as I upped your sales by 0.5%, but it is something that you could say you got tangible value if you know your business, and you know that having those people interact with your brand delivers value in the aggregate, then you spent your money wisely. It wasn't fraud, and it wasn't wasted, and it wasn't tucked away in some corner of the internet that you wouldn't be proud of if you actually knew where it was.
I'd like to add that I also love the word ROI, but I think that in terms of what comes after, it's never underestimate the long tail of the internet, because I think that you can create content campaigns, strategies, or whatever right now for the here and now that can really last months, years, decades into the future. And so if you think about it that way and plan it that way, your ROI can actually go on for a really long time also.
It's just the word, it's the words and the letters. We're good at, reinventing ourselves. Like, it's like, it makes a better headline when you say ROI is dead and you come up with some other phrase. It's still some version of that. We just, finding out, right now, I think what's the trendiest thing, I think, is Net Promoter Score. Drop that in a meeting and, it's like, yes. Because again, there's just a correlation between the higher the Net Promoter Score, the more likelihood to buy, or just invent something. I have a customer relationship index. Sure. because it's probably going to be true. The better your relationship, and you can figure out how to measure that, it's probably likelihood to purchase as well. So it just, because it's our eyes, there's a lot of words that have been co-opted and don't feel interesting anymore. But even in my performance model, there will be there will be some kind of in economic term, a return on that investment. Just how are you measuring it in weeks, days, years? It's still like, I'm going to pay you money, and hopefully that will turn into something, either a guaranteed delivery of an audience or a long-term, brand awareness, whatever your KPI is. But it just feels, it's like saying the word analog or television, ROI. It's like saying, I thought, it's like definitely people who invented the word traditional are people that worked in, digital, because it was a way to deposition what they did. And that's what we're good at, actually fighting amongst ourselves.
Anyone else?
I mean, I would just, as a content producer, like that's a tough question always to answer, is ROI. And we are always fighting, what's the media spend versus the production and brand spend. But I think that there are strategies in place for us to, align with what, the brand traditional advertising is doing, and making sure that we're in market and complementing what they're doing to drive home and build that brand favorability and relationship. And I agree. I think there is a long-term or long tail kind of relationship build that you do want to deliver with a brand between a consumer. And that's a lot of what we do with the content work, is establishing that relationship and building that powerful connection. And if you do that in more than just a one-off time, then you'll have an opportunity to continue to build that loyal audience and hopefully grow that ROI, and it'll just be kind of a natural long-term relationship.
We have time for one more question. Do we have one more question? Are you too tired and you want to go home? Change back into your snow boots. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you to this wonderful panel.